Ch5, the camping trip and other adventures. My mind was filled with new information, some of it crystal clear and some of it hopelessly opaque, when I flew back home to New York. My first visit to the Copley Woods opened up more issues than it resolved, and Kathie's cryptic, obviously heartfelt remarks about a lost child were only one example of the territory awaiting exploration. But while I was there, I had looked into other accounts, interviewed new witnesses, and explored certain other newly recollected events. So I had a vivid sense of the expanding complexity of it all. One of the most interesting stories to surface was the account of Kathie's trip with her girlfriend Nan in 1975 to Kentucky's Rough River State Park. It was the July 4th weekend. Kathie, 16 at the time, traveled with Nan's family, her parents, her younger brother, and Nan's boyfriend Sam, to a cabin in a remote area of the park. There was a lake, boating, fishing, and the other usual natural amenities of such a place. When Kathie and I first talked about her UFO-related experiences, she said nothing about this trip. It was Nan herself who reminded Kathie that something very unusual happened there. During one of my earliest phone conversations with Kathie, I had asked about any recurring dreams she might remember. One dream that remained vividly in her mind involved her sitting in a truck at night talking to someone over a CB radio. Suddenly, the lights in the truck blink off and the radio goes dead. She looks up and sees 4 lights descending, spinning like pinwheels. Terrified, she crouches down under the dashboard. In the last image of the dream, she is clutching the microphone and asking, "Who are you? What's happening?" And there the dream ends. I asked if she could recall ever literally being in such a truck, speaking over a CB radio, and she then dimly remembered. Nan's father Chevrolet pickup, which in fact did have a CB radio. The trip itself to Rough River Park was less clear in her memory. Shortly before I began to look into this incident, Kathie talked to Nan about her father's truck, and Nan had refreshed her memory with many details Kathie had forgotten. "Don't you remember the boys who turned up that night? Who he had been talking to on the radio? Especially the blonde boy who liked you so much. They came over and we had a party." Kathie told me she was astounded when she suddenly remembered. She had practically fallen in love with that blonde boy. It had been very strange. "The boys said they were camping in a particular place, and when we went there the next day to look for them, there weren't any campsites anywhere around there. It sort of didn't make any sense. We could never figure out how they found us in the first place, either because when we were talking to them on the CB, we never told them how to get to where we were. There weren't even any names for the roads around there, so I couldn't have explained it even if I wanted to. They just showed up, as I remember, in a kind of clunky old car with hardly any lights on it." The second day of my visit with the Davises, Kathie and I went into this experience in detail. On that day in 1975, she had been sitting in a truck along with Nan's brother, and her boyfriend Sam, talking to these 4 guys. "They wanted to come see us, and I told them if they could find us, they would be welcome. We'd make a party out of it. We were just talking and fooling around on the CB, and finally, Nan's brother and Sam got tired of it and went back to the cabin. A little bit later, Nan went in too, and then I was out there alone. I was having a great time. I remember seeing these lights coming down the road real slow, and the boys said on the CB,
"I see you."
And then they got out, and I got out of the truck and kind of met them halfway, and we went in a cabin. There were 3 of them. The blonde guy said there had been 4, but one of them didn't want to come. The blonde one was real cute, and I got the idea he liked me. When we went in the cabin, it was really late, maybe midnight or so, and I thought Nan's parents would be asleep, but they were up. Everybody was up, even her little brother. I kind of thought they were mad or something, but the blonde guy started to talk and everything went really well. We had some beer and talked. I think we even went outside and built up the campfire. It was fun, and they stayed a long time. I asked what their names were. You know, Kathie said. I don't think they ever told us their names. They were all wearing blue shirts, and they told us they were part of a band. I told him I liked music, and he asked me what kind, and I said rock and roll, and he said they played that kind of music. He asked me who my favorites were, and I named some groups, and he said they played music like those groups. Kathie had described the blonde, but had not mentioned the other 2, so I asked about them. I don't really remember them. I think they were tall and skinny, and I think they looked alike, but they never said anything. The blonde guy did all the talking. I was curious about what happened when they came into the cabin. Well, Nan's mother asked them what they wanted to drink, and they asked what she had, and she said beer and Cokes and coffee. They asked what she had most of, and she said beer, so he said they'd have beer. I wanted to know what else they talked about. You know, I don't remember what we talked about. We were having fun. I remember that. They were there a couple of hours. I asked if they all sat down in the cabin and talked when they came in. I don't think so. I think the other 2 guys just sort of stood there. One stood by the door. I don't think they ever said anything at all. Not even their names? I asked. Didn't the blonde guy ever say, "These are my friends George and Bill," or anything like that? I don't think so. I don't think they ever spoke, Kathie replied, leaving us both a little puzzled. Earlier, I had asked Kathie for a chance to meet Nan and Sam, now husband and wife, and the evening of this interview, they came over to the Davises' house. Sam is a quiet young man, the father of 2 children, and rather conservative in bearing. Nan is a slender and pretty woman who seems both intelligent and a bit withdrawn. At the time of this interview, her father was seriously ill, and their mood was decidedly not frivolous. I asked them about the incident, and they described it very much as Kathie had. The most interesting thing about their recollections was what they didn't remember. Neither Nan nor her husband could recall anything whatsoever about the other 2 men, except that they were tall, skinny, and wearing very similar clothes. Neither could remember hearing them speak. Each, however, could easily describe the blonde boy. Sam said that he was kind of short. stocky, wearing blue jeans and a matching blue jeans jacket over a yellowish shirt. I asked Sam and his wife what they remembered about the evening's conversation. Each recalled what Kathie had already told me, that the boys were in a band, camping nearby and so forth, but not one word or idea or even simple social exchange beyond that. Yet, they were certain the visitors had been there for hours. Sam had an interesting observation to make, however. He said that the two men, who never spoke, who were never introduced by name, and whose appearance no one could remember, stood sort of like guards while the blonde guy ran things. Kathie, Nan, and Sam shared essentially the same memories of the evening and the same peculiar gaps in their recollections. When I later interviewed Nan's mother and her younger brother, this situation was compounded. Nan's mother remembered how nice and polite the blonde boy was. When I asked him what he and his friends wanted to drink, he asked me what we had. I told him we had Cokes and coffee and beer, and he asked which we had the most of. I said we had more beer than anything else, and he said,
"That's what we'll have."
I was curious to know if he ever asked his two friends what they would like to drink, but she said she doesn't remember either of them talking at all. I also wanted to know if she had any idea of why the three had come to their cabin in the first place. I guess they wanted to meet Kathie since she'd been talking to them on a CB, and I guess they were just looking for a party. I know they stayed real late, but I don't remember much of what they said except that they were part of a band. The day after my conversation with Nan and her husband, Kathie and I decided to try hypnotic regression to further explore this strangely suggestive event. At the outset, Kathie described sitting in the parked truck with her friends, talking to some guys on the radio. One by one, her friends go inside until she is alone. Joe and Nan's brother wants to go in. He's not too thrilled about these guys. He's getting bored because there's no chicks on the radio. Nan and Sam are going to go in, but I want to stay. After a pause, she continues. I'm not really tired. I'm going to play on the radio. This guy wants me to talk with him some more. I didn't remember that. Like that. I'm having that dream. Describe it to us, Kathie. It got real light out, like it was day. And the radio still works, but there's no voices on it, just static. And something's flashing off the hood of this truck, and it's all over the truck. So I looked up in the rearview mirror and I saw it. It's real bright, and it hurts the eyes. I shut my eyes, and I can still see it coming through my eyelids. It looks like pinwheels, and there's 4 of them. And there's something sparkly in the light, like sparkles or something. And I'm really getting scared. I jumped down and hit my face under the dash, and then I wasn't scared anymore. I looked again to see if it was still there, and it was still day out. I picked up the radio and I asked them who they were and what do they want from me. And the guys were still there, and they said they wanted to see us. When I heard them talking, when they started to talk to me, everything was normal. They said I had to be pretty close, and I told them they could see me, but I wasn't going to tell them where I was. That they had to find me. That one guy that I talked most to, he was real nice. And he said,
Look down the road.
so I did. And he said,
I think I see you.
and there was a car coming up the street real slow. And they pulled in and shut their lights off before they pulled in the driveway. When they got to the front of the house, they got out. And I got out, and I walked halfway to meet them. And they walked to meet me. The blonde was in the front, and the other two were behind him, one on each side. They walked up real slow. I next asked Kathie about their car. Her description includes details which subtly suggest the vehicle was no ordinary compact car. The dirt road to the cabin was extremely bumpy and full of potholes, but Kathie said the car glided along without bouncing. Its light was very steady and even, and didn't go up and down as it went over the bumps. There was something else a little unusual about the car lights. I think one of their headlights is out. That's why I saw a little light, like side ones, But I think I only saw one light, like they had a bright light on. But I think one of their headlights was out. Later in the session, Kathie described how the car left. They started going down the street. I could see a light in front of them and the sides, but they didn't have any taillights. I thought, uh-oh, they don't have any taillights. The taillights in the car are burned out. Kathie goes on to describe their meeting. He's just smiling at me. He didn't say anything. I said, hi. And he said,
Hi.
I thought he was cute. He didn't look like he sounded on the radio, though. He looks cuter. He told me he was the one who wanted to see me. He asked where Nan was, and I said she's in the cabin. He said,
Can we go to see her?
and I was like, sure, follow me. So we went to the cabin and went in. The other guys didn't even say hi. Then we walked in and they were all awake. I thought everybody would be in bed, asleep, because it was so late. But they're not. Nan's dad is sitting on a couch. Her mom is in the kitchen, standing in a doorway watching, and my head started to feel funny around my eyes and between my eyes. And I remember that because I was getting dizzy. Her brother was there. Her and Sam were sitting on the couch, but the TV was off. I don't know why they were all in there. The blonde sat down, but the other two never sat down. One stood by the door, and the other stood on the other side of Nan's mom. I can't remember what they looked like. They were taller than the other guy. I didn't look at them much, and they didn't say anything. Did they introduce themselves with their names? No, they didn't. They never did. I thought I knew the blonde's name, but no, they never did tell us their names. Did they tell you what their band was called or anything about themselves? No, they already knew our names from the radio. Now, it seems to me that one of the first things a rock and roll band leader would do would be to tell his teenage hosts the name of his group and where it has played, even possibly embellishing its credits a bit, but it was becoming clearer by the second that this was no simple group of musicians. Kathie's father's recollections only underlined the one-way nature of the conversation. Can you remember what you talked about? About the CB and the cabin and why we were there and the 4th of July and the fireworks and music that we liked and where we were from and what we did there. Did they talk about their music and what they were doing? No, not really. They asked me what kind of music that I like, and I told them I liked rock and roll, and I named off some of the bands, and they said that they did rock and roll and that they did some music from those bands that I named off. And that's really just, all they talked about. Just that. He had on a blue jeans jacket, I remember that. Because when I got back from Kentucky, I went and bought me a blue jeans jacket just like that. What did he look like? He was about my height and he was about my size. I was a lot skinnier then, chubby, but not fat. He had a round face and blue eyes, real light brown like blonde hair. Wasn't yellow blonde, but it was blonde. Curly down to his collar, not tight curls, just lots of wavy curls, just cute. After this observant description of the leader, I was curious to know what the other two looked like. They were taller and skinnier. I can't remember their faces. I can't. Really, I think both of them had blue shirts on, but I can't remember their faces. They weren't like him, though. Several things about Kathie's descriptions, her exact choice of words, have interested me in retrospect. She said that the two silent companions weren't like him, rather than that they didn't look like him. A choice of language that suggests, perhaps unconsciously, more than just superficial differences. This suggestion takes on more weight when one considers how clearly and consistently everyone remembers the blonde leader, and how consistently everyone draws a blank on his companions. But I realized another bizarre aspect of Kathie's description of the blonde leader. She describes someone who could be her brother, even her masculine twin. My height, my size, a round face, blue eyes, shoulder-length curly dark blonde hair. Other remarks she made both before and after this hypnotic session support this feeling of special closeness. I had feelings for this man, like an obsession. It took weeks to get over it. Just before he left, he kissed me on the cheek, and I felt real funny. Nice, but funny. I couldn't stop thinking about that guy. He looked at me a lot, maybe because I was staring at him all the time. He smiled. He was always smiling at everybody, and I thought he really, liked us and liked me. I asked Kathie if she felt she'd ever seen him before or since. Someone like him? Yeah, since. I don't know. I think I felt I already knew him. But I don't know where. I guess you do that with some people, But I feel like I met somebody like him since that time. Their eyes were the same, and the way they smiled at you with them. I asked, smiled with their eyes? Yes, made you feel warm and good. It was a phrase I'd heard before in other UFO cases. Their mouths never moved. They smiled with their eyes. After I brought Kathie out of the trance state, she mentioned to me how strange everyone looked when she first took the 3 visitors into the cabin. I was sure some of them would have been in bed since it was late, but they were all up, just sitting there or standing, and the TV wasn't even on. But Bud, they were just still. Not moving, like they were hardly awake and not saying anything. And my head started to feel funny between my eyes. And then a blonde guy spoke, and everyone kind of came to life and began to move and talk. It was really weird, like they had been asleep or something. In the Betty Andresian affair, documented by investigator Raymond Fowler in his book of the same title, there is a similar scene. Betty has been taken from her home and into a landed UFO. After an extended series of events, she is returned by her captors and brought into the living room. She is startled to find her entire family sitting or standing there completely mute, looking like statues, completely unaware of her. Betty, in a hypnotic trance, describes the scene. They're all sitting there motionless. My daughter, Becky's there, and she's smiling and grinning. She seems to be awake. She seems as if she's up, standing up, just smiling at me, just standing there. Her expression isn't changing now. She seems to be frozen in that smile. This disturbing tableau, so similar to what Kathie saw when she entered the living room of the cabin, ends peacefully as Betty's captors lead each of her sleeping family members up to bed and then restore Betty's conscious memory after they leave. As we have seen, one of the basic patterns in UFO abductions, part of the modus operandi, is the ability the abductors have to shut people off, as it were, for as long as the particular operation lasts. This procedure can be seen as a way of eliminating potential witnesses, less drastic in its consequences than the mafia's basic method. This state of suspended animation has been reported by UFO investigators in widely differing situations and with varying numbers of abductees involved. In a Florida case, for example, 2 people were abducted from an automobile, while 3 other passengers were apparently switched off. In a 1975 North Dakota case, 2 were abducted while the 3rd was maintained in a suspended state. The details may change, but the method remains the same. So what really was the purpose of this visit to the cabin in Rough Rivers State Park? Even under hypnosis, Kathie did not recall anything suggestive of a conventional UFO abduction experience. The focus of this strange event seemed to be her relationship with the apparently normal blonde man who so resembled her, and their conversation together. But there's something of a sequel to this encounter involving not Kathie, but her friend Nan. One evening during the winter of 1982, Nan and Sam, now married and parents of 2 small children, were at home watching television. During a commercial, Nan went into the kitchen for a drink of water. She pulled the cord on the fluorescent ceiling light, but it did not go on immediately. She was standing at the kitchen sink, facing the kitchen window, and suddenly she went cold with fear. Only a few feet outside stood a tall figure, staring at her. He was dressed in a kind of long, tight-fitting coat, and on his feet he wore what Nan referred to as moon boots, heavy, rounded plastic footgear. He simply stared at her, unblinking. After a few seconds, the ceiling light went on, and she could no longer see the man. She raced into the living room in something close to panic, and she told me that it took her a few moments to get words out to inform Sam of the man standing right outside the kitchen window. At that time, Nan and her husband owned a beagle, which notoriously barked at any sound of movement, however faint. The backyard was completely fenced in with high mesh broken only by two conventionally squeaking gates. The dog never made a sound. Sam rushed outside with the beagle. There was fresh snow on the ground, but no sign of either the intruder or any footprints. Nan later told me that the man seemed to be looking at her from close to eye level, which would have meant that he was either phenomenally tall or was not on the ground at the time. Naturally, one does not know what to make of a bizarre report such as this. It happened so quickly that I suppose Nan's eyes could have played tricks on her, as they say. I don't know what to think except that I believe she was genuinely terrified. But I called the police. I was that scared, and I've never called the police before in my life. When I visited her house for a reenactment of the incident, it appeared to me that the figure was only perhaps 7 or 8 feet away from her, as she stood nearly paralyzed with fear at her kitchen sink. Other things Nan has said to me suggest that there may be a few more experiences like this in her life. Experiences of which she has so far only the barest of memories. A question then arises. Were Kathie and her best friend Nan perhaps both central to the purposes, whatever they were, of the 1975 visitation at Rough River State Park? One of the main reasons for my various trips to Indianapolis was to interview anyone who might have been a witness to the original June 30th, 1983 UFO landing on the Davis' property, the incident which led Kathie to contact me in the first place. Joyce Lloyd, the next-door neighbor who had described the flash of light from the direction of the Davis' backyard and a subsequent power outage and other attendant events at her house, was someone I was especially eager to meet. Joyce turned out to be a very attractive young woman who seems quiet and reserved, with a somewhat anxious undertone to her general behavior. I was able to interview her on several occasions. A few of the experiences she recalls have been explored in some depth with hypnotic regression, but several have not. The essential point, however, is that Joyce seems almost as deeply embedded in these strange events as the Davis family itself. Joyce has a round, scoop-type scar on her leg extremely similar to those on Kathie's and her mother's legs. The origin of this scar, which dates from her childhood, is unknown. In 1981, Joyce was driving home from a visit to her mother's, and though the route was familiar, she found herself becoming confused and disoriented. She remembers pulling off the road, but there her memory ends. She knows that when she finally arrived at home, her phone was ringing. It was her mother, frantically worried about her. Whenever Joyce left after a visit, her mother routinely called around the time her daughter should return home. This time, she was over an hour late, with no explanation for the delay. There are still other very odd experiences in Joyce's background, but one in particular is of interest here in the context of Kathie's camping trip encounter. In that 1975 Kentucky experience, Kathie described her 3 visitors arriving in a vehicle which had decidedly unusual lights. When I interviewed Joyce on one of my later visits to the Copley Woods, she told me about a strange experience she'd had in the summer of 1984. She had wakened in the middle of the night upside down in bed, alongside her normally positioned and peacefully sleeping husband. Her bare feet, which rested on her pillow, were wet, and the clothes she was wearing were also damp. She was cold and felt very strange. She thought she had been dreaming because she recalled lying a moment before in a field next to an automobile. She recalled that she had just seen a light rising straight up at the edge of this field, and a second later, she awoke back in her bed. The experience had been confusing and upsetting. It had seemed very real, yet she knew it must have been a dream. But there was another problem. She did not remember having gone to bed that evening. And so eventually, we began a hypnotic regression session to try and find out exactly what was dream and what, if anything, was literal reality. Joyce turned out to be an excellent hypnotic subject. Kathie and Joyce's sister, who was visiting, witnessed the regression, which could be called, among other things, the metamorphosis of an automobile. I want to remember why I was upside down in bed. It was odd. Let's go back to then, when you wake up upside down. Tell me exactly how you feel as you wake up upside down in your bed. What you're wearing, whether it's cold, how your body feels. How do you feel? I feel excited and very anxious. I had on a pair of shorts and a t-shirt. My body's damp and cold. My feet are wet. How? What am I doing here? I don't remember going to sleep, and I don't know why I wake up, except that the dream, it had to be a dream. Tell us about the dream. All I remember is, I don't remember going to sleep, but I was lying in a field, and there's a car. There's a car, and it's silver. It has funny markings on it. I don't know whether it's a car. I think it's a car. I feel pinned to the ground, laying on the ground. What are you wearing? My shorts and my shirt. I don't feel afraid. What are these markings on the car? Can't see. Black? Silver? It's very round and long. I think it's a car. Is there a driver for this car? I don't see any people. I don't know why I'm here. I'm not afraid. I know I'm dreaming. I want you to look at that field. What do you see? Long grass? Weeds? What? It's dirty in the middle, like there's been a lot of traffic. The grass is kind of burnt, like from the sun. There's tall weeds on both sides. There's tall trees, but they're far away. There's a clearing and a hill. And I see a light. All I remember is looking at the light. I see the light go away. And then I wake up in my bed upside down. I don't know about the car. This car has funny markings on it. And I don't understand why there's just me in the car. Or how you got there. I didn't worry about that because I think I'm dreaming. That's why I'm not scared. I know it has to be a dream. Well, maybe there's more to the dream. I don't know. I can't remember. We'll try a little experiment here. There probably is more to the dream that happened before the part with the car. You're going to see that part. At this point in her hypnosis, I suspected that there were other images and events which Joyce was reluctant to describe. This unwillingness to see is something I frequently encounter in hypnotic regression sessions. So I have had to develop a way around the problem. I asked the subjects to imagine a thick black curtain, a 2-section theater curtain, right in front of them. This curtain gives them safety, concealing them from whatever exists on the other side. I asked them to feel the double thick black velvet, to experience its weight and texture. Then I tell them I will count to 3, and at the count of 3, they will open the curtain a crack and peek out very quickly, closing the curtain immediately afterward. The device has worked just about every time. At 1, the subject reaches out and grasps the velvet. 2, the grip is tightened and ready. And 3, the curtain is quickly parted and closed. I used the curtain method at this point, and at the count of 3, Joyce pulled it open and took a peek. I asked what she saw. I don't know about the car. I think I want to see a car. What do you really see? I don't think it's a car. I haven't seen a car like that. Is it the same size as a car? Just bigger than a car. Not a lot bigger than a car. Silver, like cars are silver. No, it's kind of flat. It's not real shiny. Taller than a car, or about the same height, or shorter. It's longer. It's rounder. I didn't see the door. Does this car have a driver? I didn't see a driver. Is this car on any kind of road? It's on dirt, where there aren't any weeds or grass. Is this place close to where we are now? Or far away? Or where? I don't know where this place is. I've never seen this place before. I'm not scared, and I don't want to know about the car. You said it had markings on it. I think that's why I think the car was painted with black mesh. It's hard to see it. Does it have windows, like a car has windows? No. The windows are high. How big is it in relation to a car? You said it's bigger. Is it twice as big as a car? Half again as big? Maybe 4 times as big. How about the height? About 3 times. 3 times higher. How do you feel you got out to the field by this thing? I want to think I dreamed it. Well, in this dream, how did you get there? Did your dream just start there? Or do you remember dreaming getting out there? Well, what about the dream I don't understand is I don't remember going to sleep. In your dream, you're just suddenly out there? Yeah. I don't remember going to bed. Let's take another tack. You're lying next to this object. How does your body feel? I feel kind of cool. Does any part of your body feel different, unusual? My neck hurts. The back? The front of your neck? Along my spinal column? A sharp pain or an ache or what? It just aches. My eyes hurt, like short stabbing pains, like when you look at a light. How about the rest of your face? No, everything's okay. How about your chest? It feels heavy. I feel like I'm glued to the ground, like I couldn't move if I wanted to. Can you feel the coarse grass under you? Is the grass right against you? I think it's just dirt. I just feel a hard surface under me, just hard underneath me. It's dark. I remember seeing a light. I had to get here somehow. I don't think I want to remember that. I don't think I want to remember how I got here. I feel anxious when I want to remember that. It's not logical. It doesn't make any sense. Reassures her. You're safe, etc. You can remember what you feel easy about remembering. And you don't have to remember anything you don't want to. About how you got there. You are either taken here or you came here of your own accord. I remember walking in the hall. It was before a different time. I remember seeing a fluorescent light. I remember thinking I saw something in George's room. That's her stepson. I remember seeing a face, but it wasn't a little person. It didn't have features like a person. There were eyes and a face. It was real. It was real bright. The body was luminous. The head was shaped funny, but it wasn't out of proportion. Kind of square at the top, and the nose was there were patches of shadow on the face, but the suit was luminous, and it was tall, like a person, and I'd seen the face before. You'd seen the face before? I think I had, and have you ever felt something's watching you? I had that feeling. It was like a dream. I didn't want to believe it. I told myself, no. Why did you connect that face with the car? I don't know. Do you think that face was connected with the big thing in the field? I don't know. I'm not sure. I know I'm frightened of it. I don't understand it. I prepared to bring her out of the trance with reassurances. There really aren't people like that. I don't understand. There really aren't people like that. Like the figure you saw in your hallway? People like this. Are there really people like this? It doesn't make any sense. I reassure her again. I'm not afraid of them, but I can't understand. I can't understand. You're safe. You're with your friends. You're a strong person who has come through this. Pieces of this puzzle will come together, and slowly you'll understand. I brought her out of the trance state with these and other post-hypnotic reinforcements, and then asked how she felt. I'm okay, she said, appearing both relieved and puzzled. Now I know what bothers me in not understanding it. It doesn't make logical sense to me, so I can't accept it. This is a point of view I've heard dozens and dozens of times from people who have been through the same sort of experiences. Though it seems like it really happened, it doesn't make any sense. How can I believe it? And yet, how can I deny that it happened? Tracy Torme is a young man who has been involved with me in the investigation of several UFO abduction cases, including the Copley Woods affair. Tracy, whose father, the singer Mel Torme, once told me of a very interesting UFO sighting of his own, has several questions he routinely asked in such situations. First, he asked the abductee if he or she feels he was selected, handpicked, as it were, for the abduction. Every abductee he has spoken to has answered this question with a definite no. I feel like I was just in the wrong place at the wrong time, or some such, is the typical answer. Though most abductees feel that any subsequent abduction experiences they have had are deliberate, as if they had been somehow tagged. Next, Tracy asks if the abductee, having explored his or her experiences, understands the purpose of the operation, has any idea why these abductions are occurring. Again, the answer is a unanimous no, regardless of the specific images and quasi-medical procedures the abductee has recalled with or without the aid of hypnosis. No one seems to understand what it all means. Abductees like Joyce or Kathie almost always ask us, the investigators, to tell them what it all means. Why is it going on? And I always have to confess the truth. I have no idea of the ultimate purpose of it all. Tracy's third question is the key one. He asks the abductee if he or she isn't somehow secretly glad the experience happened, isn't proud of the unusual status the encounter bequeaths. Every abductee answers more or less the same way. I would give anything that this had never happened to me. It's caused me a great deal of fear and anxiety and uncertainty, and I don't really know what it means. Tracy's final question is the most ominous. He asks if the abductee feels now that his case has been explored to a certain extent, that the experience is over, that he or she will not be again subject to an abduction. The answer here is a unanimous no. Every single abductee I have ever worked with is sure that it may happen again. If they want me, they can get me, is the general sentiment. One young man said to me that if his father were president of the United States and he lived in a White House guarded by the Secret Service, he would still feel that if they wanted to pick me up again, they could. The truth that emerges from these answers is a simple one. Abductees are not believers in some religion of outer space. They are not seeking publicity or other rewards, and they are, at heart, confused and frightened by their experiences, which they regard more as a profoundly unsettling problem in their lives than as any kind of advantage. These abductees are neither paranoid nor suffering from delusions of grandeur. They are honest people who have suffered traumatic experiences they do not understand. A skeptic who knows next to nothing about the evidence, the two conditions seem to go hand in hand, once said to a friend of mine that people who take UFO abductions seriously are cultists. It's really nothing more than a cult. I thought about that and appreciated his remark because it points up an extremely interesting fact. Cults, as for example, the Reverend Moons or Father Divines or whatever, are all beliefs and no miracles. The UFO situation is the polar opposite. All miracles and no beliefs. The events happen, the landings take place, the soil is altered, people are taken, floated out of their homes or cars, incisions are made, samples are removed. UFOs have been photographed and tracked on radar, pilots and astronomers have seen them, and various government agencies have investigated these miraculous events. But what are the beliefs, the doctrines of the UFO cult? What is the faith of a typical abductee? I quote Joyce Lloyd after she describes her experience. "I can't understand. It doesn't make any logical sense to me, so I can't accept it. I want to think I dreamed it." In this strange, topsy-turvy world, the skeptics, with their ideologically rigid ideas of what is and what is not possible, are the true believers. The abductees, the people who have actually had these frightening experiences, sound like the true baffled skeptics. Joyce Lloyd's memories of lying paralyzed beside the large craft-like object in the middle of the field, her memories of the ascending light and a strange figure she saw in her son's room, all of these have echoes in other UFO abduction reports. When she first awoke and found herself with her feet on a pillow and her head at the foot of the bed, she wakened her husband and asked him what was going on. He had no explanation, as one might imagine, and asked her to turn around and go back to sleep. But the situation reminds one of other cases in which this sort of thing has happened. On October 16th, 1973, Patty Price and apparently 4 of her 7 children were abducted from their house and taken into a landed UFO. In Coral and Jim Lorenzen's account of this event, hypnotic and normal recall by 3 of the principal abductees details what happened that night. Relevant to Joyce Lloyd's situation, however, is one particular detail. 3 of Patty's children awoke in the morning to find themselves in different locations than they had been in when they went to bed the night before. No one was literally upside down, but it is clear that when the Price children were returned by their abductors, there was a certain degree of carelessness about who was put into which bed. The damp condition of Joyce's shorts and shirt suggesting that she had indeed been lying down outside on dewy grass, and her wet feet, which suggest she had walked there, have their parallel in the Sandy Thomas abduction I described in Chapter 2. Sandy recalled what she, like Joyce, hoped at the time was only a realistic dream. She remembered that a tube of liquid had been inserted in her ear as part of what seems to have been an implant operation, and when she awoke, she found that her hair and neck were inexplicably wet enough to have dampened her pillow. Her husband, like Joyce's, confirmed these odd physical details. For that matter, Kathie's UFO dream experience, apparently involving a gynecological examination, had a strange physical aftermath. She had gone to bed wearing her panties, but in the morning found them lying neatly outside the covers on top of the bed. The reader may now feel somewhat overwhelmed by the different cases I've alluded to, by the different names and locations and experiences I've mentioned, a reaction which is both understandable and almost unavoidable. But the pattern I've been dealing with in this chapter is rather simple. 2 people besides Kathie are the central figures, her best friend Nan and her next-door neighbor Joyce. As detailed in Chapter 2, Joyce was involved in Kathie's original June 30th, 1983 backyard experience as a witness. She saw the flash of light from the Davis' yard when the UFO presumably took off. She heard the sounds, suffered a power outage at her home, and was apparently prevented in some way from calling the Davises to see if they were safe. Her hypnotic recall of this experience is offered as Appendix C. So Joyce is both peripherally involved in one of Kathie's abductions and apparently an abductee in her own right. Nan, Kathie's best friend, shared with Kathie the 1975 Kentucky cabin incident with the 3 mysterious visitors. Yet with the staring figure in her backyard, Nan also seems to have her own personal involvement with the phenomenon. Kathie Davis may be the hub of this complex series of events, but even away from her, her friends and neighbors are far from immune from contagion. One of the many variants in UFO abduction accounts is the degree of amnesia one finds among the witnesses. The spectrum is as broad as one can imagine, ranging from some people who remember nearly everything at the time, the way one remembers a mugging or an accident, to some who remember almost nothing. Hypnosis, our most useful technique for breaking through these memory blocks, also varies from case to case and individual to individual in its strength and efficacy. Psychologists have noted how often the human mind seems able to deal out traumatic recollections a little at a time so that consciousness is not swamped by too many suddenly disturbing memories. This built-in self-protectiveness is something I've noticed frequently in UFO abduction cases. My feeling is that Joyce Lloyd's obviously fragmentary recollections of her experience in the field with the large craft-like object are a case in point. She was more comfortable not remembering any people, figures, drivers for the car, nor any other events that night, nor, for that matter, understanding why she associated a strangely luminous face in her house with the experience. Lately, Joyce's general health has been rather precarious, and I have no desire under the circumstances to press her into further recollections. The well-being of the abductee is of far more concern to me than the accumulation of yet more information. Moreover, I believe that Joyce has probably had a number of UFO encounters over the years, and when she feels strong enough and curious enough, they can be looked into. And one thing is certain in the meantime, her memories are not going to go away.